I think that the Belt and Road Initiative is a manifestation of global China. It's an attempt of China to globalize, and it's a culmination, if you want, of China going global and the push for Chinese company to go abroad, internationalize, and integrate with the global market. The good thing is that it ignited new imaginaries of the developing world about connectivity, about possibility to receive investments in infrastructures. I think the BRI brought back infrastructure, but brought back areas of the world that have been considered, that have been partly marginalized, have been forgotten, like Africa. Africa is an example. I think that a large focus of the BRI is the developing world, global south, that's true. But I think we also have to keep in mind that one of the goals was the European market. The goal was really to reach the European market through land and through the sea. But then, of course, the global south is also very important for China for political, economic reasons. And we saw a big expansion of China in the global south in the past years, from Africa to Latin America, etc. It has developed South-South relations through bilateral and multilateral mechanisms. A lot of countries in the global south see China as an example, as a model, as a possibility as well. For instance, the case of Africa, right? As Africa has been seen the kind of lost continent, right? With a lot of resources, now China comes in a much less paternalistic way than the West and talks about win-win cooperation, equality. And so that's I guess is positive. But again, I think it's an investment that came from China, and also the new narrative of South-South cooperation, because China paradoxically still belongs to the South. China is not considered the global North, although it has developed so incredibly in the past decades. I think that China Belt and Road Initiative is one of the prominent sources of development finance in Africa. And China promised to spend trillions of dollars in infrastructure through the Belt and Road Initiative, giving hope to a lot of developing countries, while of course raising a lot of concern in the West about increasing Chinese global presence and standards and norms. I think one of the key rhetoric that we hear is or kind of stereotypes is a debt trap, which so far has not been supported by evidence. It's true, though, that a lot of countries, including in Africa, have a lot of debt to China, and COVID made the situation even worse for these African countries to pay back China. It is definitely not debt trap. I don't think China is really plotting to put this country into debt and taking assets away from them. There are people now that talk about deglobalization. We're in a phase of deglobalization, and I think US is also trying to decouple from China. Not so much the EU for now, but there's like this sort of, we need to take a step back and decrease our reliance on Chinese market and supply chain, because the pandemic and the war in Ukraine exposed the vulnerability of supply chain. So there is this attempt to decouple from the West and deglobalize in some way, at least deglobalize from China. But the world is not following this Cold War mentality necessarily. And many countries are not willing and cannot decouple from China. And even for the US, it's very difficult to decouple, if not impossible to fully decouple. And probably the future of globalization, and I think also the BRI reflects this trend, will lead to an increased regionalism. And so, for instance, we have the RCEP that China is part, and we'll see also an increased focus in Asian economy and Chinese investments and trade with its neighbors. It will continue, right? I think globalization will still be there. Again, maybe be a bit more regional focus, but still, it will still be there. It's impossible to deglobalize. And BRI will follow partly that trend. Some people during the pandemic, they saw the BRI kind of as a dead thing, right? Now there's pandemic is destroying everything. BRI will be gone. And for some people saw the Global Development Initiative that was launched by Xi Jinping as a sort of replacement of BRI. But I think that BRI is here to stay. So it will be complemented by this other global security initiative, global development initiative, but BRI will continue. It has been very powerful imaginary, also among scholars in the global South or Europe. So there's so much that's already been discussed and imagined about BRI that I think it's hard to just disappear or fail. And so the trends, I think, moving forward, there are trends that were already existing before the pandemic, but were just kind of accelerated. The BRI project will be improved, so there will be more focus on quality rather than quantity. And we see